we found that just as some people wouldn't see the finer details there, like what we teach by and large now at Art of Coaching is communication. Like we always try to say, hey, like even when we're talking to strength coaches and our audience is very varied, we try to help them understand that, yeah, the sets and reps are important, but if you don't have the buy-in and you don't know how to connect with people, they're not going to do your training session all out anyway. It's like you can have perfect programs coach like shit, or you could have a coach that really knows how to get in. And so we find that people, just like they don't understand the nuances of training and nutrition and all the things you talk about constantly ascending, they also don't understand that communication is nuanced. Right? Not everybody wants to interact the same way you want to interact. Some guys, you got to use more analogies and metaphors. And what amazed me, Richie, is there were some coaches, you didn't see this when we work with military. You wouldn't see this when we work with tactical or EMS. But it broke my heart when we would work with some strength coaches early on, they'd be like, well, I communicate every day. I'm already good enough at it. And I'm like, imagine somebody in the military being like, I've shot off this many rounds. I've done this. I don't need to do it. Imagine somebody who's married being like, I'm married every day. I don't need to work on my marriage. And that's where I struggle. And so I wonder from a communication standpoint, like, do you feel like people miss a lot of those? Because now, even though you're not in a locker room, relationships are going to be everything still from this next point in your career. And the human element is always the hardest thing. So I'd love to know, like, just your thought on that in general, big picture. And then two, from a meta standpoint, how are you going to replace that quote unquote locker room? How, with like, what do relationships look like now at this point in your life and career? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think communication is key. I mean, it's a foundational key to life. The example I can give is, you go in, you're in the weight room and you have this big, beautiful workout and you're like, hey coach, why are we doing this paired with this exercise? And he looks at you and he goes, I don't know. I wrote it down. I just do it. And you're like, okay, yeah, kind of hard to buy in. For me, it would take just a little bit of communication. Hey, we're linking this up because we're going to work on, whatever. We're going to work on, speed or whatnot. And I was bought in. But like you said, sometimes you have to, over 53 guys on an NFL roster and 90 in the offseason, you have to have different ways of communicating with guys. And me being in that locker room setting, I've learned how to communicate with guys. Hey, what's up, bro? Oh, my guy. Oh, we're dancing. Oh, we're rapping, whatever. I think it's there's a million ways to skin a cat, but communication is key. When we're in training camp and we're dogging it out and you get there that first day and, it's back to school, everybody's saying hi, everybody hugging, and then you go that next day and you go into practice. And then you get into pads and you're grinding it out and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You're thinking, man, I don't have a day off until January. Communication is key from the coaches, setting expectations, communicating those expectations, communicating when those expectations are met and when they're not met. So it really would just help me. Sean McDermott in Buffalo was one of the best coaches I've ever played for. He would come in and he would communicate everything. He'd be like, all right, boys, we have 5 days in practice in a row. We're going to go light this day. We're going to push you guys that day. We're going to pull back the reins. And then I need 2 days of work out of you guys. And I think the whole team going into that, like, all right, let's get out there. Let's move around today. They're going to pull it back. And now we got to go for the next 2 days. I think it's, just everybody, we kind of talk about everybody rowing in the same direction. Not everybody's going to row in the same direction, but at least that boat is floating in the direction you intended.
Right. Well, and I imagine that you're right. Like if you were to ask him, I bet that took work. I bet he didn't just say, I got better at it by showing up to work every day, right? Like it's funny. We look at, we'll manage our nutrition. Oh, carbohydrates, protein, fat. We'll manage our training. Cool. Push, pull, this and that. But when you ask people about communication, they're like, it's just verbal and nonverbal. You're like, no. There's everything from the subtle art of bullshitting to knowing how to be assertive to knowing how to persuade. And I mean, even especially like the media training, I'd be interested in you guys get like, I'm sure it's not the most in-depth stuff, but knowing how to talk about these things and knowing what to say and not to say. I mean, that stuff doesn't just cost you relationships. That can cost you your career and your reputation, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think communication is just a skill that you have to be willing to get outside your comfort zone and work on every day. I think, just like training or just like starting a new venture or starting a new business, you're going to be out of your comfort zone, but that's where the most growth comes in. Once you're uncomfortable, once you're uncertain about the future, you lock in, you grind, and you create a better future for yourself. Communication is the same thing. I've played for great coaches. I've played for not great coaches. And even the not great coaches, you see them learn and develop and communicate and teach in a different way towards the end of the season by just them doing it every day. And I think if people make a conscious decision like, hey, I want to be a better communicator, dude, pick up the phone, go walk around the office, talk to 5 people, start conversations, I think that it's kind of like a lost art now. I think it's half and half. I think people are so locked in, like, this is what I'm doing, blinders on, I'm going to grind this out and I'm going to do this. And I think you have the other set of people that it's like, okay, I'm going to grind to do this. But what about this? Let me add this in. Let me take a little bit of this. Let me listen to this podcast. Let me read this book. And I think the people that are able to adapt are the people that are able to survive and excel. If you're stuck in your old ways, like, I wrote this down, this is what I'm doing, you never grow. So I think communication, it's key. It's one of those things where it's not talked about a lot, but there's a lot of weight given to it.